How trees talk without sound, this phrase stirs a curious wonder deep within us. In the quiet woods and vast forests, where silence reigns supreme, an invisible conversation unfolds continuously among towering giants. For centuries, humans have walked beneath these silent sentinels, sensing an intangible connection that goes beyond mere sight and touch. How trees talk without sound invites us to unravel this mystery. How could beings so still and rooted exchange messages without voices, without any audible sign? From ancient times, cultures around the world have woven folklore about the secret lives of trees. The Druids revered groves as sacred spaces where spirits whispered through the leaves. Native American traditions told of the Tree of Life, where branches and roots formed a network linking all living things. Even the earliest naturalists noted peculiar patterns, how trees seemed to respond to danger or to the growth of their neighbors. But these stories, though rich with insight, were often dismissed as mere myth or poetic imagination. It was only with the advent of modern science that the veil began to lift. Researchers discovered that beneath the soil, an intricate web of fungal threads connects tree roots, enabling the transfer of nutrients and chemical signals. Above ground, trees release volatile compounds to warn others of insect attacks or drought. This remarkable system, part ancient wisdom, part scientific marvels, shows that how trees talk without sound is not just metaphor, but reality. In the following exploration, we will journey through history, biology, and ecology, tracing the path from the first human observations to today's groundbreaking discoveries. Through this lens, the silent forest reveals its stories, inviting us to listen in a new way. Since the dawn of human history, trees have occupied a profound place in the human imagination, not merely as sources of wood or shade, but as living entities imbued with spirit, power, and mystery. Long before scientific methods illuminated the complex biological processes that allow trees to communicate, ancient peoples around the world intuited a deeper connection to the forest. Across diverse cultures, trees were seen as sentient beings, capable of interacting, influencing, and even talking in a way that transcended human language. These early observations and cultural interpretations laid the foundation for the enduring fascination with how trees might converse without sound in many ancient societies. The forest was not a random collection of plants, but a sacred community, a living network of beings that embodied life's interwoven fabric. The Druids of Celtic culture, for example, are among the earliest known groups to revere trees, especially certain species like the oak, ash, and yew. Druids did not merely gather wood or fruit, they regarded trees as wise sentinels and spiritual allies. Sacred groves, often dense clusters of particular trees, became central to their religious rites. These groves were believed to be places where the veil between worlds thinned, where divine knowledge could be accessed through communion with the trees. Historical texts, like those of Roman writers, Julius Caesar and Pliny the Elder, described the Druids' veneration of these groves, highlighting their belief that the trees themselves held knowledge and power that could be heard by those who knew how to listen. The trees' silent presence in these sanctuaries was interpreted as a form of communication, an unspoken dialogue between nature and humans. Similarly, in the traditions of many Native American tribes, trees occupy symbolic and spiritual roles that emphasize their connection to the entire ecosystem. The idea of the Tree of Life is widespread, a symbolic representation of the interconnectedness of all living things, with branches reaching to the heavens and roots delving deep into the earth. In these stories, trees serve as messengers and bridges between worlds, guiding spirits, providing shelter and embodying wisdom. Oral histories often recount how trees speak through rustling leaves, the shifting of branches, or even the way shadows move in the forest, providing warnings or comfort to those attuned to their signals. These stories reflect a deep ecological understanding that forest life is not fragmented but holistic, a network of mutual relationships sustained through subtle exchanges. African folklore, too, is rich with tales that personify trees and give them voices in human affairs. Among the Yoruba people of West Africa, certain trees are sacred and believed to house spirits called orishas. These spirits communicate through the trees by sending signs such as the falling of leaves or the patterns of bark that can be interpreted by shamans or elders. These messages are often warnings of impending danger or guidance for the community. The baobab tree, sometimes called the tree of life in African cultures, is revered not only for its physical longevity and resourcefulness, but also as a keeper of ancestral memory. Storytelling traditions imbue the baobab with the ability to remember and pass on knowledge across generations, reinforcing the concept that trees are active participants in the life of the people. Historical records from the ancient world further hint at this belief in arboreal communication. Early Greek philosophers, like Theophrastus, often considered the father of botany, noted how trees could respond to their environment, although his interpretations were framed within the scientific knowledge of his time. In the East, ancient Chinese and Japanese writings praised the vitality of trees and their role in balancing the energies of nature. The idea of qi, or vital energy, flowing through trees aligns with the notion that trees participate in a broader web of life energy, effectively communicating through invisible forces. Even in medieval Europe, where dominant religious paradigms often suppressed animistic beliefs, remnants of tree veneration persisted in folk practices. Trees were sometimes seen as homes of fairies or spirits, and villagers would leave offerings at certain ancient trees believed to be gateways to other realms. Such practices reflect a lingering intuition that trees speak through their presence and interaction with the human world. These varied cultural perspectives, while expressed through myth, religion, and folklore, share a common thread, an acknowledgement that trees are more than silent plants. They are living, responsive beings whose communication transcends sound and human language. The rustling of leaves, the subtle shifting of branches, the changing patterns of growth, and the communal nature of forests all inspired early humans to interpret these signs as a form of dagger, language without words. These insights were not idle superstition, but often rooted in close observation of the natural world. Indigenous peoples, in particular, depended on their environment for survival and developed finely tuned senses for detecting changes in the forest. For instance, an unusual stillness in the canopy might signal approaching storms, or the scent carried by the wind might indicate a distant fire. These sensory cues were interpreted as messages, embedded in the environment's rhythms, and carried immense practical importance. Thus, cultural interpretations of tree communication often melded spiritual reverence with ecological wisdom. The perception of trees as communicative beings also fostered deep respect and sustainable interactions. Societies that believed trees could talk often imposed taboos against needless cutting or desecration. Seeing such acts as disruptive to the forest's harmony, the forest was understood as a living system where every part mattered, and this awareness led to early conservation practices. This stands in stark contrast to exploitative views that treat trees merely as resources, As centuries passed and scientific inquiry grew, these early cultural beliefs faced skepticism, but never entirely disappeared. Instead, they laid the groundwork for the scientific revolution's curiosity about how trees interact. Today, what once was regarded as myth finds echoes in discoveries about mycorrhizal networks, chemical signaling, and even electrical impulses between trees. This convergence of ancient wisdom and modern research invites us to reconsider the legacy of early human observations, not as quaint stories, but as profound insights into the silent conversations of trees. Beyond these well-known cultures, many other ancient civilizations also developed rich understandings of trees as living communicators or spiritual entities. For instance, the ancient Egyptians regarded the sycamore fig as a sacred tree associated with the goddess Hathor, often depicted as a nurturing figure who communicated blessings to the living through the tree's branches. In Egyptian funerary art, the sycamore is shown extending shelter and sustenance to the deceased, symbolizing a bridge between worlds of form of silent dialogue that transcends mortal existence. Farther east, in Indian Vedic traditions, sacred groves and particular tree species, such as the banyan and peepal trees, held tremendous spiritual significance. These trees were thought to be abodes of gods and ancestors, guardians of wisdom and vital connectors of earthly and divine realms. The Rig Veda, one of the oldest Indian scriptures, contains hymns praising the life-giving power of trees and the forest's vitality, portraying them as living entities whose voices can be heard by those spiritually attuned. The concept of prana, the vital life force flowing through all living beings, similarly imbued trees with an unseen but powerful presence, allowing them to communicate without audible sound through this shared energy. In Japan, the Shinto religion venerates kami, spiritual essences that inhabit natural objects, including trees. Ancient sacred trees, called shinboku, are marked with sacred ropes and considered the dwelling places of these kami. When the wind rustles, their leaves or branches sway gently. It is believed to be the kami communicating with humans, invisible conversation conducted through natural signs. These traditions emphasize the subtlety of tree communication as a language of signs and presence rather than words or sound. Such beliefs also resonate in the Australian Aboriginal Dreamtime stories, where trees are living beings with ancestral spirits, and the landscape itself is a vast narrative of creation and connection. The movements of animals and trees, the rustling of leaves, and the shifting shadows all form part of a living story and ongoing communication between the natural world and its human inhabitants. This intertwining of ecology and spirituality points toward an early form of ecological literacy, where understanding the language of trees was essential for survival and harmony. Historical writings from explorers and naturalists further confirm how deeply early societies perceived tree communication. For example, accounts from 18th and 19th century naturalists describe indigenous peoples in the Amazon and Congo forests interpreting subtle changes in tree behavior as warnings of animal migrations or impending storms. This empirical observation was often dismissed or undervalued by Western science at the time, but demonstrates a sophisticated ecological awareness embedded in traditional knowledge systems. The idea of trees communicating also manifests in art, poetry, and philosophy throughout history, reinforcing cultural respect and fascination. The Romantic poets of the 18th and 19th centuries, such as William Wordsworth and John Keats, frequently wrote of the language of Tresnot as literal speech, but as an expressive, silent presence conveying the spirit of nature. This poetic sensibility echoes the ancient understanding that trees talk through their form, movement, and life cycles, inspiring human imagination and reverence. Moreover, some early philosophical traditions hinted at biological connectivity, long before modern science could prove it. The Stoics, for instance, believed in a universal logos, a rational principle pervading nature, which could be seen in the harmony and interconnectedness of living beings, including trees. This philosophical framework supported the notion that trees participate in a shared intelligent network, communicating their state through subtle means. As human civilizations evolved, many of these insights persisted in various guises, despite changing religious and cultural contexts. The tension between seeing trees as sacred communicators and as exploitable resources reflects humanity's complex relationship with nature. Yet, even in the modern era, folk beliefs about speaking trees and tree spirits have survived in local traditions, festivals, and rituals, testifying to the enduring power of this idea. What unites these diverse cultural interpretations is a recognition of trees as active participants in their environment's entities that exchange information in ways beyond human hearing, but no less real or significant. These early observations, whether expressed through myth, ritual, or practical ecological knowledge, form a continuous thread running through human history. They offer a profound lesson that communication does not depend solely on sound or human language, but can occur through the subtle, invisible exchanges of life. This understanding set the stage for the eventual scientific curiosity that would seek to uncover the mechanisms behind these ancient intuitions. As scholars and naturalists began to systematically study trees, they found that what was once dismissed as poetic metaphor or superstition had a biological basis. The silent conversations of the forest long revered in cultural lore began to reveal themselves through the lens of empirical research. In summary, early human observations and cultural interpretations of tree communication reveal a rich tapestry of belief and knowledge that recognize the forest as a living, communicating community. From sacred groves and tribal lore to philosophical musings and early scientific notes, humanity's awareness of trees' silent dialogue has been shaped by centuries of close observation and spiritual reflection. These perspectives remind us that the mystery of how trees talk without sound has long captivated the human mind, inviting us to listen deeply to the subtle languages of nature. For millennia, the realm of trees and plants was predominantly understood through the lenses of myth, folklore, and observation rooted in spirituality. However, as humanity entered the modern age, a new mode of inquiry gradually emerged, one grounded in systematic observation, experimentation, and empirical evidence. This marked the birth of scientific curiosity about plants, transitioning from poetic reverence to a search for measurable phenomena. The slow but steady evolution of botany as a scientific field in the 17th to 19th centuries laid critical groundwork for understanding plants not as inert objects but as dynamic organisms, capable of responding to their environment in remarkable ways. Early botanical study was often intertwined with medicine and herbalism. Renaissance scholars sought to catalogue the medicinal properties of plants, which required detailed descriptions and classifications. The invention of the microscope in the late 16th century, credited to pioneers like Robert Hooke, allowed the first glimpses into plant cellular structures, fundamentally altering perceptions of plants from mere decorative or functional elements to complex living systems. Hooke's observations of cells in cork would inspire a new scientific vocabulary and framework for studying life at a microscopic scale. By the 17th century, the systematic classification of plants began to take shape. Botanists like John Ray and Carl Linnaeus developed taxonomic systems that organized plants based on observable characteristics. This was no small feat. It required meticulous observation and documentation, setting a scientific precedent for exploring how plants function and interact with this. While these early botanists mainly focused on plant morphology and reproduction, their work laid the foundation for subsequent inquiries into plant behavior. The 18th century introduced more experimental approaches. Researchers began to investigate how plants respond to external stimuli, a concept now known as tropism, the directional growth of a plant in response to environmental factors, like light phototropism and gravity, gravitropism. The work of Charles Bonnet, a Swiss naturalist, was influential in this regard. Bonnet's experiments demonstrated that plants can exhibit sensitivity and movement in response to stimuli, challenging the earlier view that plants were passive and mechanistic. His work invited further questions about the nature of plant life and their capacity for perception. The 19th century witnessed pivotal advances, driven by both technological improvements and a broader scientific culture fascinated by life's diversity and complexity. Central to this era was Charles Darwin, whose evolutionary theory transformed biological sciences. Yet Darwin's interest extended beyond animals. He was deeply curious about plants' capabilities. Darwin's work on plant movement and sensitivity was groundbreaking, especially his study published in 1880, The Power of Movement in Plants, co-authored with his son, Francis Darwin. This book meticulously documented how plants move and react to their environment, sometimes slowly but purposefully, in response to light, touch, and other stimuli. Francis Darwin's own experiments, conducted alongside his father, involved detailed observations of plant tropisms and the effects of various stimuli on plant organs, such as tendrils and roots. They demonstrated that plants actively perceive and respond to their surroundings, exhibiting a form of behavior not unlike that seen in animals. Though on different timescales and mechanisms, their work significantly shifted scientific thinking. By providing empirical evidence that plants are not passive entities but dynamic organisms, capable of communication with their environment. One of the most compelling discoveries from this period was the identification of the role of plant hormones, particularly auxins, which mediate growth responses. Although the full understanding of plant hormones came later, the Darwin's observations set the stage for future research by highlighting that internal signaling mechanisms direct these movements. The notion that plants possess internal communication systems was revolutionary and opened new scientific avenues. Other scientists of the era also contributed important findings. For example, Julius von Sachs, a German botanist, advanced experimental plant physiology by studying photosynthesis and water transport, further illuminating how plants manage internal processes in response to external conditions. His experiments confirmed that plants have intricate physiological responses rather than merely passive existence. Similarly, Charles-François Bressot de Merbel and other contemporaries explored the cellular structure of plants, revealing the complexity of plant tissues and their roles in growth and response. The exploration of plant sensitivity extended beyond growth and movement. Researchers began to investigate plants' reactions to physical stimuli such as touch. In the mid-19th century, Studies on the sensitive plant Mimosa pudica showed that it rapidly folds its leaves when touched, a dramatic, visible response that contradicted earlier assumptions about plant passivity. These observations provoked debates about plant nervous systems and whether plants might possess a form of perception or even primitive intelligence. Experimental approaches also expanded to chemical signaling. Scientists noted that plants release various compounds into the soil and air, which could influence neighboring plants or deter herbivores. Although the biochemical mechanisms were not fully understood at the time, these findings hinted at a complex network of interactions, prefiguring modern discoveries of allelopathy, chemical communication between plants, and volatile, organic compound signaling. Despite these advances, the scientific community often remains skeptical or cautious about attributing too much agency or communication to plants, partly due to the prevailing anthropocentric biases that favored animal models of behavior and nervous systems. Nevertheless, the accumulating evidence steadily eroded the view of plants as inert or simple. By the late 19th century, the idea that plants could communicate in some form was becoming increasingly credible. Darwin's work inspired generations of botanists and plant physiologists to explore the hidden languages of plants. The growing field of experimental botany embraced a multidisciplinary approach, incorporating physiology, chemistry, and ecology to understand how plants sense and respond to their environment. This period of burgeoning scientific curiosity set the crucial foundation for the 20th century breakthroughs that would fully reveal the elaborate signaling networks among trees and plants. The gradual shift from seeing plants as passive background to recognizing them as active participants in their ecosystems revolutionized our understanding of life itself. The birth of this scientific curiosity was not merely an academic development, but also reflected a broader cultural shift. As the Industrial Revolution transformed human societies, scientific exploration of nature deepened, and a growing appreciation for ecological interconnectedness emerged. The discoveries about plant movement and sensitivity resonated beyond science, influencing philosophy, literature, and environmental thought. Thus, the transition from myth and folklore to empirical science did not erase humanity's fascination with how trees communicate without sound. Rather, it transformed that fascination into rigorous inquiry. From the careful cataloguing of plants to the detailed experiments of Charles Darwin and his son, the birth of scientific curiosity expanded the boundaries of knowledge and opened new paths toward understanding the silent yet vibrant conversations of the forest. The intriguing notion that plants might communicate beyond visible growth and movement laid the groundwork for a deeper inquiry into the unseen mechanisms enabling such interaction. As botanical science advanced into the 20th century, one of the most significant revelations emerged from the study of plant chemistry specifically: the discovery that trees and plants use chemical signals to converse in a language invisible to human eyes but powerful in its effect. This form of communication, woven through the release and detection of volatile organic compounds, VOCs, and other chemical substances, opened an entirely new dimension in understanding how forests function. As interconnected communities, chemical signaling among plants occurs both above and below ground. Above ground, trees emit a complex array of VOCous organic molecules that readily evaporate into the air, often in response to stresses such as insect attacks, physical damage, or environmental changes like drought. These airborne compounds act as warning signals to neighboring trees, enabling them to activate their own defense mechanisms preemptively. Below ground, chemical signals travel through root systems and networks of symbiotic fungi, facilitating exchanges of nutrients, alerts about pathogens, or other ecological cues. The historical development of plant chemistry as a field began modestly but gained momentum with the rise of organic chemistry in the 19th century. Early chemists isolated various plant compounds, alkaloids, and essential oils, but the ecological roles of these substances were not immediately understood. The focus was primarily on their uses in medicine or industry rather than as communicative tools. In the early 20th century, researchers started to observe how certain plant smells and secretions influenced insect behavior or inhibited the growth of competing plants. This hinted at a functional role beyond mere byproducts of metabolism. Pioneering work by scientists like Frederick B. Wood, who studied plant alkaloids, and later chemists investigating essential oils, laid the foundation for understanding the ecological functions of these compounds. A pivotal moment came with the discovery of allelopathy, the phenomenon whereby plants release chemicals that affect the growth and survival of other nearby plants. The term was coined in 1937 by Austrian botanist Hans Molisch, who documented how plants could chemically inhibit competitors to secure resources. This concept fundamentally shifted how ecologists viewed plant interactions, suggesting an active chemical dialogue within plant communities. Further breakthroughs unfolded as analytical techniques, like gas, chromatography, and mass spectrometry, became available in the mid-20th century. These tools allowed scientists to isolate, identify, and quantify the complex mixtures of VOCs emitted by plants. Researchers discovered that specific blends of compounds were released in response to particular stimuli, and neighboring plants could detect these blends and react accordingly. One landmark study in the 1980s by Monica Farmer and Edward Baldwin at the University of California examined how tobacco plants respond to caterpillar attacks. They found that damaged leaves emit methyl jasmonate, a VOC that not only activates the plant's own defensive enzymes but also primes neighboring plants to bolster their defenses. This was among the first clear demonstrations that plants communicate threat information chemically. Similarly, the work of Suzanne Simard, a forest ecologist whose research from the late 20th century into the 21st unveiled the complexity of below-ground chemical communication, reshaped ecological science. Simard's studies revealed that trees connect through networks of mycorrhizal fungi dubbed the wood wide web, through which carbon, nutrients, and chemical signals travel. These underground exchanges allow trees to warn one another of insect infestations, disease, or environmental stress. The recognition that chemical messages travel subterraneously expanded the idea of plant communication beyond the visible realm. Trees use vox, such as terpenes, green leaf volatiles, and methyl salicylate, each carrying distinct messages. For example, when under attack by aphids, some species release compounds that attract predatory insects like ladybugs, effectively recruiting natural bodyguards. These signals may also induce neighboring plants to produce bitter compounds or toxins that deter herbores. Moreover, chemical signaling plays a role in environmental stress responses. During drought conditions, trees emit VOCs that can cause neighboring plants to close their stomatotiny pores on leaves to conserve water. This coordinated response increases the resilience of the entire community. Historical observations also documented how plant smells serve as signals to humans and animals. Indigenous knowledge often recognized these scents as indicators of plant health or readiness to flower and fruit. For example, the pine forest's distinctive resin scent intensifies during pest outbreaks, signaling the tree's defensive response. The 20th century witnessed growing interdisciplinary research integrating chemistry, ecology, and molecular biology to decode these chemical conversations. Advances in molecular genetics uncovered the pathways plants use to synthesize signaling molecules like jasmonic acid and salicylic acid, central to activating defenses. Scientists identified receptors in plant cells that detect specific VOCs, initiating cascades of gene expression changes. These discoveries challenged prior assumptions that plants were passive organisms, revealing instead a dynamic communication system involving precise chemical signaling that rivals animal communication in complexity, albeit through a different sensory modality. While the mechanisms are invisible to human senses, the effects of chemical signaling manifest visibly in the forest's resilience and adaptation. Trees under threat can mobilize defenses faster and more effectively when warned by neighbors. This chemical language forms the backbone of forest health, coordinating individual responses into a collective survival strategy. The ongoing study of plant chemical signaling continues to reveal layers of complexity. Researchers now explore how environmental pollutants disrupt these chemical signals, potentially weakening plant communication networks. Understanding this language of smells and toxins holds promise for agriculture and conservation, offering pathways to enhance crop resistance or restore degraded ecosystems. Thus, the emergence of chemical signaling as a fundamental mode of plant communication marks a transformative chapter in the story of how trees talk without sound. What was once considered the silent backdrop of nature is now recognized as a vibrant exchange of chemical messages essential to life's web. Building upon the foundational discoveries of chemical signals in plants, scientists progressively uncovered the astonishing diversity and specificity of these compounds. Volatile organic compounds, VOCs, encompass a wide range of chemical families, including terpenoids, green leaf volatiles, GLVs, phenolics, and methylated esters. Each compound or blend serves distinct ecological functions, acting as signals not only to other plants but also to insects, fungi, and microorganisms, establishing a complex web of interactions. Terpenoids, for example, represent one of the largest groups of plant VOCs and are responsible for many of the characteristic scents of forests. From pine's fresh resin to eucalyptus's sharp aroma, beyond their pleasing fragrance, terpenoids play critical roles in defense. When conifers are attacked by bark beetles, they ramp up production of specific terpenes that deter these pests or attract their natural predators. This response is not isolated. Neighboring trees detect the elevated terpene levels and preemptively increase their own defenses. An early warning system carried through the air. Green leaf volatiles, which include compounds like hexanol and hexanol, are rapidly produced and released when plant tissues are damaged. These molecules have a sharp, fresh-cut grass smell and are among the first signals to neighboring plants that an herbivore is feeding nearby. The rapid diffusion of GLVs through the forest air allows for a near-instantaneous alert system that prepares neighboring plants to synthesize defensive chemicals or physical barriers like tougher leaves. An illustrative case of VOC signaling is found in maize corn, plants studied extensively in agricultural research. When maize plants are attacked by caterpillars, they emit a specific blend of VOCs that attract parasitic wasps. These wasps lay their eggs inside the caterpillars, effectively reducing the herbivore threat to the plants. This tritrophic herbivore, and predator is mediated by chemical signals and demonstrates the ecological sophistication of plant communication. Methyl salicylate is another VOC that functions as a systemic signal within plants and between individuals. Often called the oil of wintergreen, it is produced in response to pathogen infection or physical injury. Once released, methyl salicylate alerts neighboring plants to activate their own immune responses, enhancing resistance to diseases. This phenomenon resembles an immune vaccination at the community level, where plants can prepare defenses before pathogens reach them. Historical breakthroughs in understanding these chemical languages were made possible by improvements in technology. The development of gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, GCMS, revolutionized plant chemistry by enabling the identification of minute quantities of volatile compounds. Researchers could now catalog the VOC profiles of many species, identifying which chemicals were associated with particular stresses. One noteworthy scientist, Gerald B. Glick, contributed significantly to plant growth-promoting bacteria studies, showing that microorganisms could influence plant chemical signaling. His work underscored the intricate interplay between plants and microbes, where chemical signals mediate not only plant-to-plant communication, but also plant-microbe symbiosis. This expanded the concept of chemical language to encompass the entire ecological community. The recognition that fungi play a pivotal role in Bellegrand chemical communication brought a new perspective to forest ecology. Mycorrhizal fungi form symbiotic relationships with tree roots, facilitating nutrient exchange and signal transmission. Through these fungal networks, trees can share carbon resources or warn each other about soil pathogens. Such underground chemical dialogues amplify the resilience of forest communities and demonstrate the multidimensional nature of chemical signaling. Further research revealed that the reception of chemical signals involves specific receptors in plant cells. These receptors bind VOC molecules, triggering intracellular signaling cascades that alter gene expression and physiological responses. For instance, detection of methyl jasmonate activates genes responsible for producing defensive enzymes and secondary metabolites. This molecular mechanism highlights how chemical signals translate into tangible protective actions. The ecological implications of plant chemical communication are vast. Chemical signaling coordinates responses not only to herbivory and disease, but also to environmental stresses such as drought and temperature fluctuations. For example, some trees release isoprene during heat stress, which can stabilize cell membranes and signal neighboring trees to enhance stress tolerance. This communal adaptation enhances survival under challenging conditions. Interestingly, plants can differentiate between signals from relatives versus unrelated individuals. Experiments have shown that some species respond more robustly to VOC emitted by genetically similar neighbors, suggesting a form of kin recognition mediated by chemical cues. This discovery has important implications for understanding forest dynamics, cooperation, and competition. Moreover, the study of chemical signaling extends to the role of toxins as both defensive compounds and communicative signals. Many trees produce toxic secondary metabolites, alkaloids, phenolics, and terpenes that deter herbivores or inhibit microbial infection. These toxins, while protective, also signal to other plants and organisms about the health and status of the emitting tree. For example, high concentrations of certain phenolics in leaf litter can inhibit the growth of competing seedlings nearby, influencing forest composition. The recognition that chemical signals can serve multiple ecological functions defense attraction, inhibition, and communication illustrates the complexity of forest chemical ecology. These molecules are not just chemical waste, but finely tuned messages shaped by evolutionary pressures to optimize survival and coexistence. Throughout the 20th century, research in chemical ecology expanded rapidly, blending disciplines such as chemistry, biology, and ecology. Scientists like Thomas Eisner and Gerald Meinwald pioneered studies on insect-plant chemical interactions, elucidating how plants use chemistry to manipulate the behavior of animals, both pests and beneficials. This interdisciplinary approach deepened understanding of how chemical signaling forms a vital language within ecosystems. The practical applications of this knowledge are increasingly recognized in agriculture and forestry. Understanding plant chemical signals has led to innovative pest management strategies that exploit VOCs to attract natural predators or disrupt pest behavior, reducing reliance on synthetic pesticides. In forest conservation, monitoring VOC emissions offers a non-invasive way to detect early signs of stress or disease, enabling proactive management. Despite remarkable progress, many mysteries remain about the full extent and nuances of chemical communication among trees. Current research employs advanced genomics, metabolomics, and remote sensing to decode the chemical lexicon of forests. Scientists are discovering that chemical signaling is highly context-dependent, varying with species, environmental conditions, and community composition. The realization that trees communicate through a sophisticated chemical language revolutionizes our perception of forests from static stands of wood to vibrant interactive communities. This invisible exchange of smells and toxins orchestrates the survival, growth, and balance of ecosystems, proving that the silence of the forest masks a rich dialogue. Beneath the forest floor lies one of nature's most astonishing networks, hidden from human sight yet essential to the life of entire ecosystems. This subterranean web is woven by mycorrhizal fungi, whose symbiotic relationship with tree roots forms a complex underground communication and resource exchange system, often referred to as the Wood Wide Web. This network challenges long-held perceptions of forests as mere collections of individual trees competing for resources, instead revealing a highly interconnected community where cooperation and communication underpin survival and growth. The history of scientific understanding regarding mycorrhizal fungi and their relationship with plants begins in the early 20th century. Though observations of fungi entwining around roots date back to the 19th century, it was not until the pioneering work of botanists and mycologists that the true nature of this symbiosis became clear. The term mycorrhiza itself, derived from the Greek words for fungus, myx, and root rhiza, was coined by Albert Bernhard Frank in 1885 to describe the intimate association between fungal hyphae and plant roots. Early research focused primarily on agricultural applications, noting how certain fungi improved plant growth by facilitating nutrient uptake. Yet, the broader ecological significance of these relationships was largely unappreciated. For decades, mycorrhizal fungi were regarded as somewhat peripheral players in forest ecology, a supportive but ancillary element rather than a central one. This view began to shift in the mid-20th century, as advances in microscopy and soil biology revealed the intricate structures fungi form around and within roots. These structures, called arbuscules and vesicles in arbuscular mycorrhizae, or the mantle and heartignet in ectomycorrhizae, enable a two-way exchange. Fungi provide plants with vital nutrients, like phosphorus and nitrogen absorbed from the soil, while plants supply the fungi with carbohydrates produced through photosynthesis. The recognition that mycorrhizal networks extend far beyond individual trees was a turning point. Rather than each tree existing in isolation, scientists observed interconnected webs of fungal hyphae that linked the roots of multiple trees, often spanning different species. These connections allow not only nutrient sharing but also the transmission of chemical signals, effectively enabling trees to talk. Underground, this subterranean communication was dramatically illuminated by the groundbreaking research of Suzanne Simard and her colleagues in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Simard's studies, primarily in the old-growth forests of British Columbia, employed innovative isotopic tracing techniques to demonstrate carbon transfer between individual trees through mycorrhizal networks. Her findings revealed that mature mother trees share carbon with seedlings and other trees, facilitating their growth and survival, particularly under stressful conditions such as shading or nutrient scarcity. Simard's work also showed that these networks function as conduits for signaling molecules, allowing trees to warn neighbors about threats like insect infestations or drought stress. This chemical communication can trigger defensive responses, enhancing the resilience of the entire forest community. These insights overturned traditional forestry models that viewed trees as competitors vying solely for resources, instead portraying forests as cooperative societies sustained by underground fungal alliances. The ecological and evolutionary implications of these discoveries are profound. Mycorrhizal networks appear to mediate both competition and cooperation, balancing the needs of individual trees with those of the community. They influence forest dynamics, succession patterns, and biodiversity by facilitating nutrient redistribution and supporting seedlings that might otherwise perish. This hidden web helps stabilize ecosystems, making them more robust against environmental fluctuations. Further research has identified various types of mycorrhizal associations with different ecological roles. Ectomycorrhizal fungi, common in temperate and boreal forests, form thick sheaths around roots and penetrate the root cortex between cells. Arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, prevalent in tropical and grassland ecosystems, penetrate root cells directly, forming tree-like arbuscules where nutrient exchange occurs. Each type supports different plant species and contributes uniquely to ecosystem functioning. Beyond nutrient exchange and signaling, mycorrhizal fungi also influence soil structure and health. Their extensive hyphal networks bind soil particles, improving aeration and water retention. By decomposing organic matter, they recycle nutrients and enhance soil fertility, creating favorable conditions for plant growth. This biotic-abiotic interaction underscores the fungi's integral role in ecosystem engineering. The recognition of the wood wide web has also transformed perspectives on forest management and conservation. Traditional practices often overlooked the importance of soil microbiota, focusing on above-ground biomass and tree species alone. However, it is now understood that disturbing mycorrhizal networks through cutting, soil compaction, or chemical use can undermine forest regeneration and resilience. Conservation strategies increasingly emphasize protecting and restoring these fungal communities as foundational to forest health. Scientific exploration continues to uncover the complexities of these networks. Recent studies reveal that trees can selectively allocate resources through mycorrhizal connections, favoring kin or certain species, suggesting a sophisticated level of underground decision. Additionally, fungal networks can bridge vast distances, sometimes extending hundreds of meters, connecting seemingly isolated trees and enhancing landscapely ecological coherence. The concept of the forest as a superorganism, integrated entity composed of interconnected parts, finds robust support in the existence of mycorrhizal networks. These networks provide a physical and biochemical basis for the integration, where individual trees act less as isolated units and more as parts of a larger, cooperative organism. This perspective invites a re-evaluation of how humans relate to forests, advocating for approaches that honor these deep connections. Moreover, the Wood Wide Web illustrates the limitations of traditional scientific paradigms that prioritize competition and individualism. In contrast, it reveals that cooperation, communication, and mutual aid are equally fundamental ecological forces. Trees, underground conversations mediated by fungi exemplify these principles in action, painting a picture of forests as communities thriving through interdependence. This understanding has practical implications beyond natural forests. In agriculture and horticulture, harnessing mycorrhizal associations can improve crop productivity and reduce reliance on chemical fertilizers. Techniques such as inoculating soil with beneficial fungi are gaining traction, inspired by natural models of plant-fungal symbiosis. Educationally and philosophically, the discovery of the Wood Wide Web challenges anthropocentric views of intelligence and communication. It expands the definition of a community to include organisms that interact through invisible networks of exchange. It encourages a more holistic view of ecosystems, emphasizing relationality and shared existence. In summary, the underground mycorrhizal network represents one of the most compelling dimensions of how trees talk without sound. From early observations of fungal root associations to the sophisticated isotopic and molecular studies of recent decades, this hidden world reveals a web of life that is at once chemical, physical, and biological. The Wood Wide Web fundamentally redefines forests not as collections of individual trees, but as vibrant, interconnected societies sustained through intricate fungal alliances. As research advances, it promises to deepen our understanding of ecology, inform conservation, and inspire renewed reverence for the silent but eloquent conversations beneath our feet. Scientists increasingly realized the profound complexity and significance of these underground networks. Early 20th century researchers often underestimated the scale and dynamism of these connections. However, as microscopy techniques advanced and soil ecology blossomed into a scientific discipline, a new picture emerged of an intricate, interconnected fungal web acting as an ecological nervous system beneath the forest floor. The work of Frank in the 1880s introduced the terminology and first observations of the mycorrhizal relationship. Yet it was not until decades later that the full ecological and communicative functions were recognized. Mycorrhizal fungi are not a single species but a diverse group, encompassing thousands of species with varying structures and ecological roles. This diversity enables the fungi to adapt to multiple ecosystems, from boreal conifer forests to tropical rainforests and even grasslands, illustrating the universality of these underground networks. One of the earliest major breakthroughs in recognizing the significance of these networks in forest ecology came from the pioneering mycologist Paul F. Sears, who in the 1930s and 1940s emphasized the importance of soil, fungi for plant nutrition and community dynamics. Sears demonstrated that mycorrhizal fungi significantly enhance phosphorus uptake, a nutrient often limiting in soils, thereby facilitating better tree growth and survival. His insights helped shift forestry and agricultural practices to consider soil microbial health as integral to plant productivity. During the mid-20th century, another key figure, John Girdman, expanded the understanding of arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, AMF. Girdman's detailed studies elucidated the life cycles and root colonization processes of AMF, revealing how they penetrate root cortical cells to establish intimate nutrient exchange sites. His work illustrated how fungi essentially extend the root system far beyond its physical limits through an expansive hyphal network, dramatically increasing the soil volume accessible for nutrient absorption. Meanwhile, the study of ectomycorrhizal fungi, EMF, which primarily associate with temperate and boreal forest trees such as pines, oaks, and birches, revealed equally fascinating dynamics. EMF envelop root tips with a dense sheath and form the Hartig net between root cells, facilitating efficient bidirectional nutrient transfer. EMF also produce enzymes capable of breaking down complex organic compounds in soil, allowing access to nitrogen and phosphorus sources otherwise unavailable to trees. These fungal associations are not merely passive nutrient suppliers, but active participants in forest ecology. They modulate plant hormone levels, influence root architecture, and even affect the immune responses of their hosts. The communication between fungi and trees is chemically rich and genetically regulated, involving numerous signaling molecules that initiates colonization and maintains symbiosis. The discovery of the Wood Wide Web phenomenon transformed this understanding further. In the 1990s and early 2000s, Suzanne Simard and colleagues at the University of British Columbia used isotopic tracing with carbon-13 and radioactive tracers to follow the movement of photosynthetically derived carbon between trees connected by mycorrhizal fungi. Their studies conclusively demonstrated that carbon can be transferred from mature, established mother trees to younger seedlings, and even to different tree species. Simard's work revealed that this carbon sharing is often directional. Trees, in better light conditions or greater health, provide carbon to shaded or stressed neighbors, effectively nurturing the next generation. This altruistic behavior, mediated by the fungal network, boosts forest regeneration and biodiversity. It also suggests a level of cooperation and communal resource management previously unappreciated. Moreover, Simard's research showed that trees use these networks to send warning signals when under attack. When a tree is infested by aphids or attacked by pathogens, it releases chemical signals transmitted through the fungal mycelium to neighboring trees, which then activate their own defensive mechanisms. This subterranean communication acts as an early warning system, enhancing the resilience of the forest community as a whole. The implications of this network extend beyond simple nutrient sharing or defense signaling. Studies indicate that fungal networks can mediate competition as well, regulating which trees receive resources based on species compatibility or genetic relatedness. This selective allocation may support kin trees or certain species over others, influencing forest composition and succession. The Wood Wide Web also provides resilience against environmental stresses such as drought. Research shows that during dry periods, fungal networks can redistribute water and nutrients from wetter areas or trees with better access to resources to those under stress, buffering the impacts of climatic fluctuations. This collective adaptation highlights the integral role of fungal networks in ecosystem stability. Beyond nutrient and chemical signaling, mycorrhizal fungi significantly influence soil structure and function. The extensive hyphal networks bind soil particles, improving porosity and aeration, which enhances water infiltration and retention. This physical alteration of the soil matrix promotes a healthier root environment and supports diverse microbial communities vital for nutrient cycling. Fungal decomposition activity further contributes to soil fertility by breaking down complex organic matter into accessible nutrients. Through enzymatic processes, mycorrhizal fungi convert dead plant material and animal residues into forms that plants can absorb. This biogeochemical cycling underscores the fungi's role as ecosystem engineers, shaping both biological and physical aspects of forest habitats. In addition to these ecological roles, mycorrhizal fungi have fascinating evolutionary histories intertwined with plants. Fossil records indicate that mycorrhizal symbioses date back over 400 million years, coinciding with the colonization of land by plants. This ancient partnership likely facilitated plant adaptation to terrestrial environments by enhancing nutrient acquisition in nutrient-poor soils. Understanding the evolution of these networks provides insights into why such symbioses are nearly ubiquitous among terrestrial plants today. The coevolution of plants and fungi represents one of the most successful mutualisms in nature, driving diversification and ecological dominance of forests. In contemporary forestry and conservation, the importance of preserving mycorrhizal networks has gained recognition. Practices that disturb soil structure, such as clear-cutting, heavy machinery use, and chemical fertilization can disrupt fungal communities, impairing regeneration and ecosystem function. Restoration ecology now emphasizes inoculating soils with native mycorrhizal fungi to rehabilitate degraded lands, promoting natural forest recovery. Similarly, sustainable agriculture benefits from incorporating mycorrhizal fungi to reduce fertilizer use, enhance crop resilience, and improve soil health. These practices, inspired by natural fungal plant networks, support ecological balance and long-term productivity. At the frontier of research, scientists employ molecular biology, genomics, and metabolomics to decipher the complex signaling pathways and gene expression involved in mycorrhizal symbiosis. These tools uncover how plants and fungi communicate at cellular and molecular levels, including how they recognize each other, establish connections, and regulate resource exchange. Intriguingly, recent studies suggest that mycorrhizal networks may also play roles in plant memory and adaptation. Some evidence points to epigenetic modifications induced by fungal associations, allowing plants to remember past environmental stresses and respond more effectively in future encounters. This emerging field opens new questions about the cognitive capacities of plant-fungal partnerships. Philosophically and culturally, the discovery of the Wood Wide Web challenges anthropocentric views and deepens our appreciation of nature's interconnectedness. It invites a more holistic worldview that sees ecosystems as dynamic, interdependent communities rather than collections of isolated individuals. This perspective has implications for environmental ethics, conservation policy, and humanity's relationship with the natural world. In sum, the underground mycorrhizal network represents a profound mode of tree communication, enabling exchange of nutrients, information, and defense signals that sustain and coordinate forest life. From early mycological discoveries to the detailed isotopic studies of recent decades, The story of the Wood Wide Web reveals a hidden world of cooperation and complexity beneath our feet. Recognizing and protecting this network is essential for understanding and preserving the silent, vibrant conversations that define how trees talk without sound. As we continue to unravel the myriad ways trees communicate without sound, attention turns from the chemical whispers beneath the soil to a phenomenon that more closely resembles the nervous system of animals: electrical signaling. Though trees lack brains or nerves in the animal sense, they exhibit electrical pulses-minute changes in voltage across cell membranes that travel rapidly through their tissues, enabling swift transmission of information. This hidden network of electrical impulses constitutes an underappreciated but vital mode of tree communication, coordinating responses to environmental stimuli and internal cues with remarkable speed. The concept that plants might use electrical signals dates back centuries, though it was often dismissed or misunderstood due to the absence of nervous systems in plants. Early observers noticed movements or reactions in plants that seemed too rapid to be explained by slow growth processes alone. For instance, the sensitive plant Mimosa pudica famously folds its leaves within seconds of touch, prompting curiosity about the mechanisms behind such rapid responses. In the late 18th and early 19th centuries, pioneering scientists began to explore electrical phenomena in living organisms more broadly. Luigi Galvani's work with animal electricity in frog muscles laid the groundwork for understanding bioelectricity. Soon after, researchers hypothesized that similar electrical currents might exist in plants. These early ideas were rudimentary and often speculative, but they planted seeds for future inquiry. A key figure in plant electrophysiology was Jagadish Chandra Bose, an Indian scientist active in the early 20th century. Bose conducted meticulous experiments demonstrating that plants respond electrically to stimuli, transmitting signals through their tissues, much like nerves transmit impulses in animals. Using highly sensitive instruments he developed, Bose showed that plants exhibit variations in electrical potential upon mechanical, chemical, or environmental triggers, and these changes propagate through the plant body. Bose's research was revolutionary in several ways. First, it challenged the prevailing view of plants as passive organisms by revealing a dynamic internal signaling system. Second, it suggested that plants possess a form of sensory physiology that allows them to detect and respond rapidly to changes in their environment. Bose's work inspired a generation of scientists to investigate plant electrophysiology more deeply, though his findings were not universally accepted at the time. Throughout the mid-20th century, advances in electrophysiological techniques such as microelectrodes and oscilloscopes enabled more precise measurement of electrical signals in plants. Researchers documented electrical potentials and action potentials brief, rapid changes in membrane voltage in various species. These signals were shown to propagate along phloem tissues, the plant's nutrient-transporting vascular system, suggesting a role in long-distance communication within the plant. One landmark study involved the Venus flytrap Dionea musipula, whose rapid leaf closure is triggered by electrical impulses. Scientists recorded action potentials generated when trigger hairs are touched, causing the trap to snap shut within milliseconds. This remarkable example illustrates how electrical signaling enables fast behavioral responses in plants, despite the absence of a nervous system in trees. Electrical signals serve to transmit information about physical damage, pathogen attack, or environmental stress. When a branch is wounded, electrical changes propagate through the vascular system to distant parts of the tree, activating defensive genes and metabolic pathways. This rapid communication prepares unaffected tissues for potential threats, enhancing the tree's survival prospects. Research in the late 20th and early 21st centuries expanded understanding of the molecular and cellular mechanisms underlying plant electrical signaling. Ion channels proteins embedded in cell membranes regulate the flow of charged particles. Ions such as calcium, potassium, and chloride, generating changes in membrane potential. The orchestrated opening and closing of these channels produce electrical signals that move from cell to cell via plasmid matter, cytoplasmic connections, and vascular tissues. Calcium signaling plays a particularly important role in plant electrophysiology. Changes in intracellular calcium concentrations act as secondary messengers, translating electrical signals into biochemical responses. For example, increased calcium levels can activate enzymes responsible for producing defensive compounds or triggering growth adjustments. Key researchers, such as Alex Volkov, have pioneered modern plant electrophysiology, developing innovative techniques to measure electrical activity in trees in natural environments. Volkov's work includes experiments showing that electrical signals in poplar and other tree species can respond to environmental factors like temperature changes, drought, and mechanical stress, modulating physiological processes accordingly. Studies have also revealed that electrical signaling integrates with chemical and hormonal signaling pathways. For instance, an electrical impulse may trigger the release of jasmonic acid or ethylene, hormones involved in defense and stress responses. This crosstalk illustrates how electrical signals coordinate with other modes of communication to produce coherent and effective reactions. Interestingly, electrical signals can travel much faster than chemical signals alone, allowing trees to respond to localized damage or threats within seconds or minutes rather than hours or days. This rapid transmission is critical for survival, particularly in environments where herbivory or pathogen attacks can escalate quickly. The analogy between plant electrical signaling and animal nervous systems has its limits, but it highlights an important convergence in biological communication strategies. Plants have evolved unique mechanisms suited to their sessile lifestyle, enabling them to monitor and respond to complex environmental cues, despite lacking centralized nervous tissue. Historical skepticism about plant electrophysiology has gradually given way to acceptance as evidence accumulates from molecular biology, biophysics, and ecology. The integration of electrophysiological studies with ecological research reveals how electrical signaling contributes to whole plant and community-level responses. Furthermore, emerging research suggests that electrical signaling may also play roles in plant memory and learning. Some studies indicate that electrical signals modulate gene expression patterns that persist after the initial stimulus, potentially allowing plants to remember past events and respond more effectively to repeated stresses. Beyond scientific research, the concept of electrical signaling in trees inspires philosophical reflections on plant sentience and awareness. While trees do not possess consciousness as animals do, their ability to rapidly process and transmit information challenges traditional boundaries between plant and animal life. In practical terms, understanding electrical signaling offers potential applications in agriculture, forestry, and environmental monitoring. Non-invasive electrical measurements could serve as early indicators of plant stress or disease, enabling timely intervention. Manipulating electrical pathways might enhance plant resilience or optimize growth. As research continues, the hidden pulses of electrical signals promise to reveal further dimensions of how trees talk without sound. Dynamic, rapid, and essential communications coursing through living wood, linking cells and organs into a responsive, integrated whole. The study of electrical signaling in trees has unveiled a remarkable complexity that parallels, in many respects, the nervous systems of animals, albeit through fundamentally different biological structures and mechanisms. While animals rely on specialized neurons and synapses, trees and other plants use variations in electrical potential across cell membranes, facilitated by ion channels and plasmid matter, to rapidly transmit information throughout their tissues. This system allows trees to coordinate intricate physiological responses and adapt to dynamic environmental conditions despite their rooted, immobile existence. Early 20th century researchers often regarded plants as passive organisms, responding slowly and largely through growth changes. However, the discovery of rapid electrical signaling revolutionized this perception, suggesting a vibrant internal communication network. Jagadish Chandra Bose's pioneering work in the early 1900s was particularly transformative. He developed highly sensitive instruments capable of detecting electrical impulses in plant tissues and demonstrated that plants respond electrically to various stimuli, including mechanical touch, changes in light, temperature fluctuations, and even chemical applications. Bose's research, published in works like The Nervous Mechanism of Plants, 1906, showed that electrical signals travel through plant tissues at measurable speeds, comparable to slow nerve impulses in animals. Bose's methodology involved connecting electrodes to plant stems and leaves and recording voltage changes when stimuli were applied. He observed that the signals propagated through the plant's vascular system and could trigger physiological changes such as leaf movement or altered sap flow. This work laid the foundation for modern plant electrophysiology, although initially met with skepticism due to prevailing biases against plant sentience. Following Bose, scientists in the mid-20th century refined electrophysiological techniques, introducing microelectrodes and improved recording devices. These advances enabled detailed studies of action potentials, rapid transient changes in membrane potential in various plants, including large woody species. Researchers found that action potentials in plants share certain characteristics with those in animal nerves, including threshold triggering, propagation along tissues, and refractory periods. In the Venus flytrap, a carnivorous plant famous for its swift leaf closure, action potentials generated by mechanical stimulation of trigger hairs travel through leaf tissues, causing the trap to snap shut within milliseconds. This rapid electrical response demonstrates how plants use electrical signaling to perform complex, adaptive behaviors despite lacking muscles or a nervous system. In trees, electrical signals primarily travel along the phloem, the vascular tissue, responsible for transporting sugars and signaling molecules. The phloem's living sieve tube elements are connected by plasmid matter, allowing electrical and chemical signals to propagate. Studies show that when a tree experiences wounding or pest attack, electrical signals move from the affected site to distant tissues, initiating defensive responses such as production of secondary metabolites or reinforcement of cell walls. These electrical impulses function as early warning messages that can rapidly mobilize the tree's biochemical defenses. For example, when a bark beetle begins feeding on a conifer, the tree generates electrical signals that spread throughout, triggering resin flow to trap and repel the insect. Such defenses are critical for long-lived trees facing persistent threats. Recent research has revealed that plant electrical signaling integrates with other communication pathways, including chemical and hormonal signaling, ion fluxes especially. Calcium, potassium, and chloride ions generate changes in membrane potential that act as electrical signals. In turn, these changes can prompt the synthesis and release of plant hormones like jasmonic acid and ethylene, which regulate growth, defense, and stress responses. Calcium ions play a pivotal role as second messengers linking electrical and biochemical signals. When electrical pulses traverse plant cells, transient increases in intracellular calcium concentrations activate protein kinases and transcription factors, leading to changes in gene expression. This molecular cascade enables electrical signals to produce targeted physiological outcomes. Alex Volkov's recent studies have advanced the understanding of electrical signaling in trees under natural conditions. Using non-invasive electrodes placed on poplar trees, Volkov's team recorded electrical responses to environmental stimuli such as drought, temperature shifts, and mechanical damage. They found that electrical signals not only propagate within individual trees, but can also be detected in neighboring plants, suggesting potential interplant communication through shared mycorrhizal networks or volatile compounds. This raises intriguing questions about the possibility of electrical signals supplementing or complementing chemical communication between trees. While much remains speculative, the convergence of electrical, chemical, and fungal-mediated signaling points to a highly integrated communication system in forests. Electrical signaling is also implicated in plant responses to abiotic stresses, like temperature extremes and water scarcity. When subjected to cold shock, plants generate electrical potentials that induce the production of antifreeze, proteins, and osmoprotectants, improving cellular resilience. Similarly, during drought, electrical signals modulate stomatal closure to reduce water loss, conserving resources. The speed of electrical signaling, often measured in centimeters per second, allows plants to coordinate systemic responses far more rapidly than through hormonal diffusion alone, which can take hours or days. This rapid transmission is vital in dynamic environments where delays could result in irreversible damage. Some studies suggest that electrical signals contribute to plant memory and learning. Repeated exposure to stress may modify the amplitude or frequency of electrical responses, potentially priming plants for faster or stronger future reactions. Although plant memory lacks consciousness, these epigenetic and physiological changes represent an adaptive form of information storage. Experimental evidence supports that electrical signaling may also influence plant development. For example, electric fields generated by ion fluxes can guide root growth, direction, influence cell differentiation, and affect flowering timing. This electrical regulation complements genetic and hormonal controls, revealing a multifaceted network guiding plant life cycles. Beyond basic research, practical applications of understanding electrical signaling in trees are emerging. For instance, electrical measurements could serve as early indicators of stress or disease in forestry and agriculture, allowing preemptive management. Devices that monitor plant electrical activity might become tools for precision agriculture, optimizing irrigation, fertilization, and pest control based on real-time plant feedback, ethically and philosophically. Recognizing electrical signaling in plants challenges long-standing notions of plant insentience and prompts re-evaluation of human relationships with vegetation. While trees lack central nervous systems and consciousness, their ability to perceive, process, and respond to environmental stimuli through electrical impulses expands the biological continuum of responsiveness. In summary, electrical signaling represents a vital, hidden pulse coursing through trees, connecting cells and organs in a dynamic web of communication. From the early observations of rapid plant movements to the sophisticated electrophysiological studies of the present day, this mode of communication reveals the complexity and sensitivity of plant life. As research advances, it promises to deepen our understanding of how trees talk without sound, highlighting the silent pulses that sustain and coordinate forest ecosystems. The silent communication of trees extends beyond chemical and electrical signals to the subtle yet profound realm of mechanical signaling, how plants perceive and respond to physical forces such as touch, wind, and pressure. This form of communication, often overlooked, is a crucial component of how trees interact with their environment and with each other. Mechanical stimuli can shape growth, trigger defense mechanisms, and influence forest dynamics, illustrating a sophisticated sensory system that allows trees to feel their surroundings without sound or sight. The study of plant responses to mechanical stimuli has a rich history rooted in early botanical curiosity. In the 19th century, naturalists and horticulturists observed that plants exposed to wind or regular touch often grew differently compared to those sheltered from mechanical forces. These observations laid the groundwork for the concept of thigmomorphogenesis, term coined in the 1970s to describe the growth and developmental changes plants undergo in response to mechanical perturbations. Thigmomorphogenesis literally means touch-formed growth, encompassing a variety of physical stimuli, including bending, rubbing, vibration, and pressure. Early experimental work demonstrated that plants subjected to repeated mechanical stimulation tend to develop shorter, thicker stems and altered root architecture, adaptations that improve structural stability and resilience against mechanical stressors like wind or rain. One of the classic early experiments was conducted by German botanist Gustav K. Weber in the late 1800s, who showed that mechanically stimulated plants exhibited different growth patterns than controls. By brushing seedlings daily, Weber observed reduced elongation and increased stem diameter, indicating that physical touch could directly influence morphogenesis. Further exploration into the physiological mechanisms of thigmomorphogenesis revealed that plants perceive mechanical stimuli through specialized proteins embedded in cell membranes sensitive to deformation. These mechanosensitive channels open in response to membrane stretching or pressure, allowing ions such as calcium to flow into cells and initiate signal transduction pathways. The influx of calcium ions following mechanical stimulation acts as a second messenger, triggering a cascade of biochemical events that modulate gene expression and hormonal balance. This leads to changes in cell wall composition, growth rates, and tissue differentiation, producing the characteristic morphological adjustments associated with thigmomorphogenesis. Mechanical signaling is particularly important for trees, whose large size and exposure to environmental forces necessitate adaptive strategies. Wind-induced mechanical stress promotes the development of stronger, more flexible wood by altering lignin and cellulose deposition in stems and branches. This adaptive response enhances the tree's ability to withstand storms and avoid breakage. Moreover, mechanical stress influences root growth patterns. Trees subjected to mechanical stimuli often develop deeper or more widespread root systems, improving anchorage and access to water and nutrients. This dynamic allocation of growth resources reflects a sophisticated ability to sense and respond to physical cues from the environment. In addition to growth regulation, mechanical stimuli can trigger defensive responses. Physical damage from herbivores, falling branches, or weather events activate signaling pathways that lead to the production of protective chemicals such as tannins and resins. These compounds deter further damage and contribute to the tree's resilience. Intriguingly, some studies suggest that trees can also perceive mechanical signals generated by neighboring plants, such as vibrations caused by insect feeding or wind movement. This raises the possibility that mechanical signaling plays a role in interplant communication, allowing trees to detect and respond to biotic interactions in their vicinity. The integration of mechanical signaling with other communication modes, chemical, electrical, and fungal networks underscores the complexity of tree sensory systems. Mechanical cues can modulate chemical signal production and electrical activity, creating a multidimensional communication matrix that coordinates growth, defense, and environmental adaptation. Historical botanical research on mechanical responses also highlighted the influence of gravity and touch on plant tropisms, directional growth movements. Thigmotropism, the growth response to touch stimuli, is exemplified in climbing plants such as vines and tendrils, which coil around supports to secure themselves physically. While not typical for trees, this phenomenon illustrates the importance of mechanical sensing in plant survival. Mechanical stimulation experiments further revealed that repetitive touch reduces elongation growth, a phenomenon that could protect young trees in windy habitats by promoting sturdier stems. This insight has practical implications for forestry and agriculture, where mechanical conditioning or training can improve plant robustness. More recent molecular studies identified key genes involved in mechanotransduction, including those encoding mechanosensitive ion channels and transcription factors that regulate stress-responsive genes. The interplay between these genetic components and hormonal pathways such as ethylene, auxin, and abscisic acid fine-tunes the plant's response to mechanical forces. Ethylene, for example, is known as a stress hormone in plants and is often upregulated following mechanical stimulation. Elevated ethylene levels can inhibit elongation growth and stimulate radial expansion, consistent with thigmomorphogenic adaptations. Auxin redistribution in response to mechanical stress affects cell elongation and differentiation, shaping the plant's form to better cope with environmental challenges. The concept of plant intelligence is increasingly informed by these findings, as mechanical signaling demonstrates plants' capacity to perceive and integrate diverse sensory information to optimize survival. While plants lack brains or neurons, their distributed sensory and signaling systems function as decentralized networks that enable adaptive behavior. Wind, as a persistent mechanical stimulus, plays a critical ecological role in shaping forest structure. Trees in exposed sites often exhibit flagging asymmetric growth caused by prevailing winds, and develop dense wood with altered mechanical properties. This wind-induced phenotypic plasticity illustrates how mechanical signaling directs developmental processes to produce biomechanically optimized forms. Furthermore, mechanical stress influences phenology, the timing of growth and reproductive cycles. For instance, some trees delay bud burst or flowering in response to mechanical damage or wind stress, prioritizing survival over reproduction during adverse conditions. The ecological consequences of mechanical signaling extend to forest dynamics. and competition. Trees that sense and respond effectively to mechanical stimuli may gain advantages in stability and resource acquisition, influencing species, distribution, and forest composition over time. In natural forest communities, mechanical signals often interact with biotic factors such as herbivory or fungal infection. Damage caused by animals or pathogens generates mechanical stress that activates local and systemic defense responses, mediated through integrated signaling pathways. The recognition that mechanical stimuli convey important information within and between trees broadens our understanding of silent communication. Unlike chemical signals that diffuse more slowly or electrical signals that propagate internally, mechanical signals arise from direct physical interactions and environmental forces, providing immediate feedback on structural conditions. This mode of communication is not limited to active responses, but includes passive sensing. For example, trees detect and respond to gravitational pull, gravitropism, and substrate contact, adjusting growth, direction, and strength accordingly. Such mechanical awareness enables trees to adapt to uneven terrain, soil conditions, and neighboring vegetation. Contemporary research is exploring how trees might interpret complex mechanical stimuli, such as the frequency and amplitude of vibrations caused by insect feeding or environmental noise. Advanced instrumentation, including laser, vibrometry, and high-speed imaging, reveals subtle plant movements and responses previously undetectable. Understanding mechanical signaling has practical applications in forestry, agriculture, and environmental management. Mechanical conditioning techniques, such as brushing or shaking seedlings, are employed to produce sturdier, more resilient plants. These methods mimic natural mechanical stresses to enhance wood quality and resistance to environmental challenges. Moreover, monitoring mechanical responses can serve as indicators of tree health and stability. Changes in growth patterns or responsiveness to mechanical stimuli might signal underlying stress or disease, informing management decisions. From a broader perspective, mechanical signaling exemplifies the interconnectedness of biological and physical processes in nature. It demonstrates that trees not only respond chemically and electrically to their environment, but also engage physically with the world, sensing forces and adapting structure in a continuous dialogue. The integration of mechanical, chemical, and electrical communication pathways reveals trees as sophisticated organisms, capable of dynamic interactions with their environment. This multifaceted sensory capacity forms an essential part of how trees talk without sound, silently perceiving and responding to the world around them. As the intricate communication networks within trees, chemical, electrical, mechanical, and fungal, become more apparent, the ecological implications of these silent conversations emerge as a profound influence on forest ecosystems. This chapter delves into how these communication systems shape forest ecology by mediating defense strategies, resource sharing, and cooperation among trees. These biological dialogues challenge traditional views of forests as mere assemblages of competing individuals, suggesting instead a vision of dynamic, interconnected communities working in concert. The roots of ecological thought regarding forest communities trace back centuries, shaped by observations and philosophical reflections of early naturalists. Alexander von Humboldt, often heralded as the father of modern ecology, laid foundational ideas about nature's interconnectedness during his explorations in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. Humboldt's detailed descriptions of tropical forests emphasize the intricate relationships between plants, animals, climate, and geology. foreshadowing contemporary ecosystem science. Humboldt's vision inspired generations of scientists to consider the forest not simply as a collection of isolated organisms, but as an integrated whole, where interactions define the system's structure and function. This holistic perspective gradually took hold through the 19th and 20th centuries, culminating in the development of ecosystem ecology, which investigates energy flows, nutrient cycles, and species interactions. Within this evolving framework, the concept of tree communication as a driver of forest dynamics gained momentum. Historically, forests were seen primarily through the lens of competition trees vying for sunlight, water, and nutrients. While competition remains a vital ecological process, evidence from plant communication research reveals an overlay of cooperation and mutualism that modulates these interactions. One of the most striking ecological implications of tree communication involves defense strategies against herbivores and pathogens. When a tree suffers insect attack or infection, it emits chemical signals, volatile organic compounds, VOCs, that warn neighboring trees of the threat. These neighboring trees then activate their own defenses preemptively, producing toxins or strengthening cell walls. This priming effect reduces damage across the community and exemplifies how communication enhances collective resilience. The underground mycorrhizal networks, often referred to as the wood wide web, further amplify cooperative defense. These fungal connections transmit signals of distress between trees, enabling resource sharing and coordinated responses. For example, a stressed tree may receive carbon compounds from healthier neighbors through the fungal network, supporting recovery. This facilitation blurs the boundaries between individual organisms, fostering a community-level defense system, resource sharing through communication. Networks also extends to nutrient and water distribution. In heterogeneous environments, trees connected by mycorrhizal fungi can redistribute nutrients from nutrient-rich areas or dominant individuals to seedlings or less competitive neighbors. This redistribution supports forest regeneration and diversity. By nurturing younger or vulnerable trees, cooperation mediated by communication, networks influences forest succession and species composition. By facilitating seedling establishment and growth through resource transfer and chemical signaling, established trees shape the developing forest community. This process affects species diversity, competitive hierarchies, and habitat structure. From an evolutionary standpoint, these cooperative interactions present compelling questions. How do trees balance competition and cooperation? What mechanisms ensure that resource sharing benefits the collective rather than selfish individuals? Research suggests that kin recognition trees, preferentially sharing resources with genetically related neighbors, plays a role. This selective cooperation aligns with theories of inclusive fitness, where helping relatives enhances overall genetic success. Historical studies in forest ecology observed patterns suggestive of such kin-based cooperation, though the underlying mechanisms were unclear until molecular and communication research provided insights. Understanding these processes has implications for conservation, indicating that preserving genetic diversity and communication networks is vital for forest health. The ecological impact of electrical and mechanical signaling complements chemical and fungal communication. Rapid electrical signals propagate warnings of damage, coordinating swift, systemic responses. Mechanical sensing enables trees to adjust growth and strengthen structures, adapting to environmental pressures like wind or herbivory. These Signals integrate into a comprehensive system, optimizing forest function. Contemporary ecosystem science increasingly recognizes forests as complex adaptive systems, where communication networks contribute to stability, resilience, and productivity. This perspective informs management and restoration practices, emphasizing the protection of communication pathways such as mycorrhizal networks and the maintenance of species interactions. For instance, clear-cutting or soil disturbance can disrupt fungal networks, impairing tree communication and resource sharing, which in turn reduces forest regeneration rates. Restoration efforts now incorporate inoculation with native mycorrhizal fungi to rebuild these networks and support natural recovery processes. Moreover, climate change poses new challenges that underscore the importance of tree communication. Increased frequency of droughts, storms, and pest outbreaks demands rapid and coordinated responses within forest communities. Communication systems enable such responses, highlighting their critical role in forest adaptation and resilience under changing conditions. Beyond ecological functions, the notion of forests as cooperative communities reshapes ethical and philosophical perspectives on nature. It challenges anthropocentric views that prioritize individualism and competition, inviting a more relational understanding of life. This shift supports conservation ethics grounded in respect for interconnectedness and mutual support among organisms. In sum, the ecological implications of tree communication extend from individual survival strategies to the functioning and resilience of entire forest ecosystems. From Humboldt's early insights to modern ecosystem ecology, the evolving understanding of forests as communicative communities offers profound lessons about cooperation, adaptation, and the silent conversations sustaining life beneath the canopy. The exploration of how trees communicate without sound has entered a transformative era, thanks to modern technologies that have revolutionized the study of plant signaling and ecology. Where once researchers relied solely on direct observation and rudimentary experiments, today's scientists deploy a sophisticated arsenal of molecular biology tools, network analysis methods, and remote sensing technologies to unveil the complex silent language of trees. This chapter explores these technological advancements, tracing their history and highlighting how each innovation has deepened and expanded our understanding of tree communication. The foundation for molecular investigation in plant science was laid in the mid-20th century, marked notably by the discovery of DNA structure in 1953 by James Watson and Francis Crick. This breakthrough enabled biologists to begin decoding the genetic basis of plant traits and responses, including those related to communication. Early molecular biology techniques such as DNA sequencing, polymerase chain reaction (PCR), and gene expression analysis opened doors to investigating the genes involved in signaling pathways. By the late 20th century, researchers had begun identifying key genes responsible for producing and perceiving chemical signals, such as those encoding enzymes synthesizing volatile organic compounds, VOX, and receptors detecting these compounds. For example, studies on model plants like Arabidopsis thaliana allowed the mapping of signaling cascades involved in plant defense and environmental sensing. This molecular insight revealed the intricate biochemical conversations taking place at the cellular level within and between trees. Simultaneously, advances in microscopy enhanced visualization of cellular and subcellular structures involved in communication. Confocal and electron microscopy techniques enabled scientists to observe plasmids matter, microscopic channels, linking plant cells, mycorrhizal fungal hyphae in unprecedented detail. These visualizations helped confirm physical pathways facilitating intercellular and interspecies signaling, the emergence of genomics and transcriptomics. Technologies accelerated research dramatically. High-throughput sequencing allowed whole genome and transcriptome analysis, revealing how gene expression patterns shift in response to environmental stimuli or communication signals. This systemic approach showed that communication triggers widespread genetic reprogramming, coordinating growth, defense, and stress adaptation. Alongside molecular methods, electrophysiological technologies have become vital in studying electrical signaling in trees. Sensitive microelectrodes and non-invasive sensors detect voltage changes across membranes and along vascular tissues, capturing real-time electrical activity. Portable electrophysiology devices enable in situ monitoring of trees in their natural habitats, linking electrical signals to environmental conditions and biological responses. One notable technological innovation is the use of isotopic labeling. Combined with mass spectrometry and nuclear magnetic resonance, NMR imaging, pioneered by scientists like Suzanne Simard, isotopic tracers such as carbon-13 or nitrogen-15 help track the movement of nutrients and signaling molecules through fungal networks and plant tissues. These methods provide direct evidence of resource sharing and signal transmission pathways beneath the forest floor, elucidating the so-called Wood Wide Web. Network analysis, a mathematical approach borrowed from computer science and sociology, recently been applied to forest ecology to model and quantify communication networks among trees. By representing trees as nodes and their communication links as edges, researchers can analyze network properties such as connectivity, robustness, and information flow. This approach helps identify keystone individuals or species that play outsized roles in sustaining communication and resource distribution in forests. Remote sensing technologies have further expanded the scope of tree communication studies from individual trees to whole forest landscapes. Multispectral and hyperspectral imaging from satellites, drones, or airborne platforms capture data on canopy health, stress indicators, and chemical emissions over large areas. This spatial perspective allows scientists to observe patterns of communication and response at ecosystem scales, linking micro-level signaling to macro-level forest dynamics. For example, sensors detecting VOC emissions from forest canopies can reveal pest outbreaks or drought stress before visible symptoms appear. Coupling these observations with ground-based molecular and physiological data provides a comprehensive picture of forest health and communication. Additionally, developments in bioinformatics and machine learning enable the integration and analysis of vast datasets generated by these diverse technologies. Computational models simulate signaling pathways, predict responses to environmental changes, and identify communication patterns difficult to detect through traditional analysis. These tools accelerate hypothesis testing and generate new insights into the silent language of trees. Historically, each technological leap has corresponded to paradigm shifts in plant science. Early molecular techniques transformed descriptive botany into mechanistic biology. Electrophysiological instruments revealed rapid signaling previously undetectable. Isotopic tracers visualized underground networks, and network theory redefined forests as communicative communities. This technological progression continues today with emerging tools such as single-cell RNA sequencing, which dissects gene expression, at unprecedented resolution, and advanced imaging modalities like magnetic resonance imaging (MRI) and positron emission tomography (PET) adapted for plant tissues. These allow non-destructive, dynamic monitoring of internal processes related to communication. Furthermore, synthetic biology and gene editing technologies like CRISPR-Cas9 offer future possibilities for experimentally manipulating communication pathways to understand their functions and potentially enhance forest resilience. The convergence of these technological advances embodies a shift from studying trees as static organisms to viewing them as dynamic communicators engaged in continuous, multifaceted exchanges. As scientists decode this silent language, they gain tools not only to satisfy curiosity but also to address urgent ecological challenges, such as forest conservation, climate change, adaptation, and sustainable resource management. On some, modern technologies have transformed our ability to observe, measure, and interpret the hidden dialogues of trees. From molecular insights to ecosystem-scale monitoring, these innovations reveal the complexity and elegance of tree communication, offering a richer understanding of how forests function and thrive in silence. One of the most transformative technologies enabling the study of tree communication has been advances in high-throughput sequencing and genomics. The ability to sequence entire plant genomes rapidly and cost-effectively has empowered researchers to map the full repertoire of genes involved in communication and stress responses. For example, the sequencing of the populus Trichocarpa genomatha, first tree genome to be fully decoded, and unlocked insights into gene families responsible for defense, signaling, and growth regulation. This genomic information allows scientists to identify gene expression patterns in response to specific stimuli, revealing how communication triggers systemic changes. In particular, transcriptomic studies examining RNA expression levels have shown that trees respond to mechanical wounding, pathogen attack, or drought by altering thousands of genes, many associated with signaling pathways. By comparing expression profiles from affected and unaffected tissues, researchers can track how messages propagate through the tree at the molecular level, parallel to genomic advances. Proteomics, the large-scale study of proteins, has provided a dynamic view of the biochemical machinery activated during communication. Proteomic analyses reveal the production of enzymes, receptors, and signaling molecules that execute and regulate responses. For example, enzymes synthesizing volatile organic compounds (VOCs) are upregulated during insect attack, facilitating chemical signaling to neighbors. Chemical ecology techniques also integrate with these molecular approaches. Gas chromatography, mass spectrometry (GCMS) allows precise identification and quantification of VOCs emitted by trees. Combined with isotopic labeling, this technique tracks the origin and destination of chemical signals within forest communities. Such studies have demonstrated that trees can differentiate between signals emitted by kin and strangers, adjusting their responses accordingly, finding with profound ecological and evolutionary implications. Meanwhile, the application of monitoring has become more sophisticated and accessible. Modern, portable devices measure bioelectrical potentials non-invasively, enabling researchers to observe electrical signaling in natural environments over extended periods. Such longitudinal data provide insights into how electrical pulses correlate with environmental variables like temperature, humidity, and herbivory pressure, illuminating the adaptive functions of electrical communication at the interface of biology and physics. Biophotonics offers novel possibilities. Some researchers explore the role of ultrawake photon emissions biophotons in plant signaling, hypothesizing that light-based communication may complement chemical and electrical pathways. Although this field is nascent and controversial, emerging imaging technologies, capable of detecting these faint emissions, could uncover yet another layer of the silent language of trees, one of the most groundbreaking technological achievements in recent decades is the visualization and mapping of mycorrhizal networks underground. Traditional microscopy provided limited views, but innovations in fluorescence microscopy and genetic barcoding of fungal species now allow precise identification of fungal partners and their spatial distribution. Techniques such as DNA enable the analysis of fungal community composition across soil samples, revealing complex networks connecting multiple tree species to directly observe nutrient and signal flows. Isotopic tracers have been indispensable. By labeling carbon or nitrogen atoms with stable isotopes, scientists track their movement through fungal hyphae and into neighboring trees. This direct evidence of resource sharing underscores the cooperative dimension of forest ecosystems. The mathematical tools of network analysis complement these biological insights. By constructing models of tree fungal connections and signaling pathways, ecologists can quantify the resilience and efficiency of forest communication networks. Network metrics identify hub trees, often large, old individuals that disproportionately facilitate resource distribution and information flow. Protecting these keystone trees is crucial for maintaining forest health. Remote sensing has expanded from aerial photography to multispectral and hyperspectral imaging, capturing detailed biochemical and physiological signals from forest canopies. Satellite sensors detect stress-induced changes in leaf pigment composition and canopy temperature, serving as proxies for communication-triggered defense activation. Drones equipped with advanced sensors enable fine-scale mapping of forest patches, integrating spatial and temporal data. In addition to passive sensing, experimental manipulation using robotics and controlled environments has become a frontier. Automated systems simulate wind, touch, or herbivore damage on trees, while monitoring responses via molecular, electrical, and imaging technologies. This integrative approach elucidates how trees process and prioritize multiple signals in complex changing environments. Artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms play a growing role in synthesizing the vast datasets produced by these technologies. These tools identify patterns and correlations invisible to human analysts, generating predictive models of tree behavior and communication under different scenarios. For example, AI can forecast how trees might respond to novel pests or climatic stress based on historical signaling data. Importantly, these technological advances have not only enriched scientific understanding, but also opened new avenues for forest conservation and management. Early detection of stress through chemical or electrical signals can guide targeted interventions to prevent widespread damage. Understanding communication networks informs reforestation strategies that preserve or restore critical fungal partnerships and keystone individuals. Furthermore, public engagement and citizen science initiatives increasingly harness portable sensors and smartphone-based apps to monitor tree health and communication signals, democratizing data collection and fostering stewardship. Looking ahead, interdisciplinary collaborations between plant biologists, ecologists, physicists, computer scientists, and engineers promise to uncover even deeper layers of the silent language of trees. Innovations such as nanosensors embedded in trees, real-time biochemical monitoring, and synthetic biology modifications hold transformative potential. In conclusion, modern technologies, from molecular biology and electrophysiology to network analysis and remote sensing, have revolutionized our capacity to perceive, quantify, and interpret the silent communication systems of trees. These tools reveal forests not as static backgrounds, but as dynamic, interconnected communities engaged in constant, multifaceted exchanges. Understanding this silent language enriches our appreciation of nature's complexity and equips us to better protect the vital ecosystems on which humanity depends. The burgeoning field of plant communication has not emerged without its share of skepticism and spirited debate, since early observations suggested that plants respond to and influence one another in complex ways. Many scientists, philosophers, and skeptics have challenged the interpretation, methodology, and broader implications of these findings. This section explores the historical and ongoing controversies in plant communication research, the varying scientific opinions, and the philosophical questions that surround the concepts of plant intelligence and consciousness. Importantly, it also considers how these debates have shaped the trajectory of scientific inquiry, often driving innovation and rigor in the field from the outset. The idea that plants could communicate or behave in ways akin to animals was met with resistance. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, scientific orthodoxy viewed plants primarily as passive organisms, responding to environmental conditions through predetermined mechanical processes like growth and tropism. The pioneering electrophysiological work of Jagadish Chandra Bose in the early 1900s, which revealed electrical signaling in plants, was initially dismissed or ignored by many contemporaries, partly because it challenged entrenched biological paradigms, and partly because Bose's cultural background placed him outside Western scientific elites. The skepticism was rooted partly in the anthropocentric bias that regarded intelligence and communication as traits uniquely or predominantly reserved for animals possessing nervous systems and brains. Plants, lacking these structures, were often excluded from the realm of intelligent behavior. This skepticism extended to the terminology itself. Communication and signaling, applied to plants, were often seen as metaphorical or poetic rather than literal descriptions. Throughout the 20th century, the idea of plant communication experienced gradual acceptance as more empirical evidence accumulated, particularly with the discovery of chemical signaling via volatile organic compounds, VOX, and the elucidation of mycorrhizal fungal networks. Still, some scientists expressed caution, emphasizing that while plants exhibit complex biochemical interactions, this should not be conflated with conscious communication or intentional signaling. These debates often hinged on defining what constitutes communication. Some researchers argued that communication implies intentionality and meaning, which plants presumably lack, while others favored broader definitions encompassing any information transfer that elicits a response in another organism. This semantic divide influenced experimental designs and interpretations, sometimes leading to polarized opinions. Controversy intensified with the rise of the concept of plant intelligence and even plant consciousness in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Books like Peter Tompkins and Christopher Bird's The Secret, Life of Plants, 1973, popularized the idea that plants possess awareness and feelings. igniting public fascination but also scientific criticism for lacking rigorous evidence. While such popular works helped raise awareness, they sometimes blurred the line between scientific research and speculative philosophy, complicating the field's credibility. Philosophical questions also arose regarding the nature of intelligence and consciousness. If plants can sense, remember, and respond adaptively to their environment, do they exhibit a form of intelligence distinct from animal cognition? Some biologists and philosophers have argued for a more inclusive view of intelligence, encompassing distributed, decentralized information processing systems like those in plants. This view challenges anthropocentric and neurocentric paradigms but remains controversial. Opponents caution against anthropomorphism, warning that attributing human-like qualities to plants risks misinterpretation and undermines scientific objectivity. They argue for careful language and rigorous criteria to avoid conflating complex biochemical processes with conscious experience. Methodologically, studying plant communication presents unique challenges that have fueled skepticism. Plants' slow and often subtle responses require precise, long-term experiments with sophisticated instrumentation, making reproducibly difficult. Variability in environmental conditions, genetic backgrounds, and interspecies interactions complicate data interpretation. Early studies that lacked controls or were anecdotal faced criticism, leading to calls for higher experimental standards. Moreover, the complexity of forest ecosystems, where multiple signaling pathways, chemical, electrical, mechanical, and fungal intersect, makes isolating specific communication mechanisms challenging. Disentangling cause and effect requires interdisciplinary approaches that have only recently become feasible. Scientific debates have also extended to the evolutionary implications of plant communication. Some critics question whether the observed signaling benefits individual plants, their relatives, or the broader community, raising questions about natural selection and cooperation. The idea of altruistic signaling challenges traditional views of competition-driven evolution and has sparked vigorous theoretical discussion. Despite these controversies, the debates have propelled the field forward by encouraging more rigorous, interdisciplinary research. Researchers have increasingly adopted quantitative methods, advanced molecular tools, and ecological modeling to test hypotheses about communication mechanisms and evolutionary functions. Ethical considerations have also entered the discussion, particularly concerning how recognizing plant communication and intelligence might influence human attitudes toward plants and ecosystems. Some advocate for expanding moral consideration to plants based on their sensory and communicative abilities, while others remain cautious. In sum, challenges and controversies in plant communication research reflect the tension between revolutionary ideas and entrenched scientific paradigms. These debates have shaped research directions, fostering innovation and deeper inquiry, while reminding scientists to balance open-mindedness with critical rigor. The evolving dialogue continues to refine our understanding of the silent, complex conversations that trees and plants engage in every moment. The journey into uncovering the silent communication of trees has reached a remarkable point, where new technologies and interdisciplinary research promise to propel the field into uncharted territories. As the 21st century advances, the future of understanding tree communication appears poised to reshape not only scientific knowledge, but also practical approaches to forestry, conservation, and agriculture. This closing section explores potential research directions, emerging projects, and the broader cultural and philosophical shifts that may result from embracing the idea that trees communicate without sound, building on the technological foundations laid by molecular biology, electrophysiology, network analysis, and remote sensing. Future research will increasingly integrate these tools with cutting-edge innovations. For example, single-cell omics technologies allowing the examination of gene expression, proteins, and metabolites at the individual cell level will offer unprecedented resolution of communication pathways within trees. This granular insight can elucidate how different cell types coordinate during signaling events and how messages propagate through complex tissues. Advances in imaging will complement molecular studies. Techniques like magnetic resonance imaging, MRI, and positron emission tomography PET, adapted for plant tissues, will enable non-invasive, dynamic visualization of resource flows and electrical signals. Coupling these imaging modalities with biosensors embedded in trees will create real-time monitoring systems for forest health and communication. Synthetic biology presents another exciting frontier. By engineering plants or fungal partners with modified signaling pathways or reporter genes, researchers can experimentally manipulate and visualize communication in vivo. Such approaches will help test hypotheses about signal function, specificity, and evolution, deepening mechanistic understanding. The application of artificial intelligence, AI, and machine learning will grow as the volume of biological and environmental data expands. AI-driven models can integrate molecular, physiological, and ecological datasets to predict how tree communication networks respond to environmental changes, pest outbreaks, or climate stress. These predictive capabilities will inform forest management and conservation strategies, allowing proactive interventions. Interdisciplinary collaboration will become increasingly essential. The complex, multi-scale nature of tree communication requires expertise from ecology, microbiology, bioinformatics, physics, and engineering. Projects like the Earth Biogenome Project, which aims to sequence genomes of all eukaryotic life, will provide valuable genomic resources for plants and their microbial symbionts, facilitating integrated studies of communication and evolution. But furthermore, growing interest in the microbiome, the community of microbes associated with plants, will deepen appreciation of how microbial partners influence tree communication. Understanding these tripartite interactions among trees, fungi, and bacteria will reveal new dimensions of signaling networks and ecosystem dynamics. Applied research will focus on leveraging knowledge of tree communication to enhance forestry and agriculture. For example, manipulating chemical signaling or mycorrhizal networks could improve pest resistance or nutrient use efficiency. Developing crops that better communicate or cooperate with soil microbes may reduce reliance on chemical fertilizers and pesticides, promoting sustainable agriculture in forestry. Early warning systems based on chemical or electrical signals could detect pest infestations or drought stress before visible symptoms appear, enabling timely management actions. Restoration ecology will benefit from strategies that re-establish communication networks, such as inoculating soils with native mycorrhizal fungi to accelerate forest recovery. Moreover, urban forestry and green infrastructure projects may incorporate communication-informed designs to optimize tree health and ecosystem services in cities. Understanding how trees perceive and respond to mechanical stresses like wind or human activity can guide planting and maintenance practices. Beyond practical applications, The expanding understanding of tree communication holds profound implications for human perspectives on nature. Recognizing forests as interconnected communicative communities challenges reductionist views that see nature as a collection of isolated parts. This holistic vision fosters greater respect for ecological complexity and interdependence. Culturally, the awareness that trees silently talk may inspire renewed reverence for forests, influencing environmental ethics and policy. It invites us to reconsider humanity's relationship with the natural world, not as dominators, but as participants in a vast web of communication and cooperation. Educational programs integrating these scientific insights can cultivate environmental stewardship in future generations, emphasizing the intrinsic value of forests beyond their economic utility. The symbolic and spiritual significance of trees, deeply rooted in many cultures, may find new resonance in the light of scientific discoveries. Ethical debates will likely evolve regarding the moral consideration owed to plants, informed by evidence of their sensory and communicative capacities. These discussions intersect with broader questions about consciousness, intelligence, and the rights of non-human organisms, challenging anthropocentric frameworks. The field's future also depends on addressing ongoing challenges, such as ensuring equitable access to technological advances and data, fostering open interdisciplinary dialogue, and maintaining rigorous scientific standards amidst public fascination and media sensationalism. In conclusion, the future of understanding tree communication is bright and multifaceted, as science uncovers deeper layers of the silent language trees use. It not only advances knowledge, but also reshapes practical approaches to managing and conserving forests and agricultural systems. More fundamentally, it invites a transformation in how humans perceive their place within the natural world, shift from isolation to connection, from silence to listening, from domination to coexistence,